Okay, hi, I'm Lauren, and we chose two theories, functionalist and critical, to analyze Invictus, and I'm going to tell you why we chose functionalist. So, primarily, I think that functionalist theory, as we learned in class and through the textbook, shows how sport can reflect social order, and consequentially, that means sport can also be affected by social inequalities such as racism and class, which we witnessed at play in Invictus. But it also means that sport has a functional value, which is to be able to transfer things like moral codes and leadership values. And I think the two parallel stories of the leadership of Nelson Mandela as president of South Africa and Francois Pienaar as captain of the Springboks both really illustrate functionalist theory at play. So when Nelson Mandela was told how many people would be spectating at the World Cup, he said, "A billion people watching us. This is a great opportunity." And I think that quote illustrates how he saw the opportunity for the functional value of sport to kind of proliferate his message of, promoting racial equality and harming all of the tension that had happened in his country because of apartheid. And then also, Francois Pienaar said to his team when they responded negatively about having to do a bunch of different PR things and like a leadership training, like a coaching camp for youth in South Africa. Francois said to his team after meeting that resistance, he said, "Times change and we need to change as well." And I think that's a great example of how functionalist theory was at play here because Francois saw that in society and in post apartheid South Africa, times were changing and people had to catch up with racial and social inequality. And he was seeing how on his Springbok team, they needed to do that as well. And part of that effort was, get out there and help coach youth. And in that way, I think the functionalist theory, the way we can analyze the movie Invictus with functionalist theory is best by looking at that parallel leadership arcs of Francois and Nelson Mandela because we kind of have a political example and a sport example, which is what functionalist theory is all about.
For my part, for this presentation, we chose to do critical theory and explain why and how we found it within the movie Invictus. So we selected critical theory to examine the film's deeper commentary on power, justice, and inequality, which has been found out throughout the whole movie. A pivotal moment occurs when Mandela actually encourages South Africans to keep the Springbok name despite its association with the apartheid and having such a tarnished name and reputation from the past. As the movie continues, we see as a beacon of justice for racial equality, people that were close to Mandela were kind of confused at why he was endorsing this team that had such a terrible past. And throughout the movie, Mandela reclaims it, changing its past and its oppressive legacy to rebranding a new and inclusive national identity. And this aligns with Critical's theory's focus on confronting systems of domination and transforming them to something better. Just kind of how, like, a caterpillar uh, cocoons and then metamorphosizes into a beautiful butterfly. Within Evictus, sport as not only as a mechanism of social integration, but also as contested space where ideology struggles play out. These critical applications are seen in the racism of both the country and the Springbok team, with the nationalist tension among the rugby fans, and finally, as well as the social atmosphere within Mandela's office.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Cubenbert. I am part of Group 5, and I'm answering question B for not only the group paper, but also the slideshow presentation, and our film is Invictus. So I am going to share my screen and present to you my portion of the slideshow. Um, so you can all see this now. I will present this in slideshow format. This is my slide, or this is not my slide. This is my slide here, and I'm answering the question, who is the antagonist and how are they at the center of the application of our theories? So There is no central physical antagonist in this film. However, racial apartheid, which is essentially segregation, the equivalent of segregation. So essentially, it kept uh, Black South Africans from doing a lot of different things, like using public amenities, being able to vote, those type of things, and constraints within, segregation of South Africa. That serves as the biggest antagonist of the film. But like I said, there is no one true central antagonist to the film. So there's not just one central person that's saying like, hey, like you can't do this, or hey, there's certain things that Black South Africans cannot do, or maybe they're inferior. All those things are kind of social circumstances that are cemented by politicians and policymakers that are from years beforehand. So in reality, you could kind of say that politicians and policymakers do serve as a central antagonist, but they don't really have much of a component in the film. So yeah, racial apartheid and constraints are prevalent throughout turmoil throughout the film, most specifically between white South Africans and black South Africans. So a good example of this is when the black South African fans are not appealing to the majority white South African rugby team. Instead, they are showing all of their favor towards the opposing team in England. And, realistically, if another team comes on your home court, simply said, you probably shouldn't be rooting for them. You should probably be rooting for the home team. But this example from the film really exemplifies just a disdain and hatred towards white South Africans from the Black South African community, which is just really based on societal standards and then set expectations that are set for the two racial sectors of Black and white South Africans. So, kind of what this means is that social circumstances and racial apartheid, which was kind of abolished, and then there was the post-apartheid period, which this film is set in. Um, while, there is a lot of new circumstances and a lot more available for Black South Africans, they still did not trust or appreciate white South Africans at all because they were very demeaning and disrespectful to Black South Africans for years upon end. And Black South Africans and the Black South African community weren't simply willing to forgive white South Africans for all of their wrongdoings towards them and their community. And they stood on that and they did not support them in the ways that they would have wanted. And so these really just apply back to our theories, our central theories of the functionalist theory and the critical theories of the sociology, because applying the functionalist theory, simply put, sport does reflect social order. And in the post-apartheid era, you can kind of see how integration plays a big part. But in, apartheid, you saw that a lot of these Black South Africans, they didn't get to live very normal lives because of segregation and racial bias. And also, in addition to that, it can be used to heal wounds. The functionalist theory can. So a good example of this is when Nelson Mandela pushes for equality of both teams because an Olympic game is really going to be held there, a big part of it, and rugby is such a big part of it. So of the country and the sport and the country itself. So yeah, Nelson Mandela does push for equality, and this can be reflected to show social order, and then also helping out within the country and trying to connect all these people back together. But also it applies to the critical theory because discrimination does lie within the sport, and it can also defy social boundaries. So there's a lot of discrimination that lies within this film, and a lot of that lies within the country and its social parameters of people not getting equal opportunities, the Black South Africans not getting those opportunities that they likely wanted to. And yeah, a lot of it really relies around that. But that's all I got to say. Thank you.
While racial divisions were the main antagonists within Invictus, I also believe that Nelson Mandela himself was a symbolic antagonist, as he always consistently challenged the goals and expectations of others and generated tension throughout the film. One such tension that he generated was when the South African Sporting Council voted unanimously to remove the colors and the name of the Springboks as it is closely linked to apartheid And immediately after Nelson Mandela found out of the unanimous vote to get rid of the national rugby team, the Springboks, he went into the council and told them why they are wrong and why they should reinstate the colors of their national rugby team. From a functionalist theory, Mandela sees rugby as a way to unify the racially divided South African population. This is true because functionalist theory talks about how sport reinforces society's value system. So, from Nelson Mandela's perspective, he wanted to reform like how society views each other with rugby. Yeah, and from a functionalist perspective, Mandela used rugby as a tool to reinforce shared societal values and promote national unity in post-apartheid South Africa, especially with how polarized both of the black and white populations were. Moving on, critical theory talks about how the power of authority of a group wields over others. So, in a sense that from critical theory, Nelson Mandela was an antagonist as his actions were reinforcing the symbols of apartheid rather than immediate transformative change. And yeah, so from a critical perspective, many South Africans can say that Mandela was using rugby as a way to distract from all the other issues going on rather than just fixing all the other issues. He used rugby to distract South Africans from that. And yeah.
Hi, my name's Aaron, and I'm going to be talking about what the positive aspects of the movie in Vegas were, and in what way the movie contributes to the sport experience and has a positive outcome on our society as a whole. This movie provides a ton of positive aspects, specifically about how sport is portrayed as having a large impact on healing, uniting people, and transforming society. First, I'd like to talk about how it promotes unity through the sport of rugby. Um, that is what I found as the most impactful and important theme. This can be seen when President Mandela used the Rugby World Cup to kind of bridge the gap between South Africa's white and black population. Instead of removing the team which was associated with white supremacy, Mandela found a way to unite everyone by encouraging black South Africans to support the team and in order to change their view of the new government, which has abandoned the separation between the two races. Another important theme is sports' role in social change and how it can be used for political strategy as well as social transformation. An example of this is how President Mandela demonstrates how sport can alter how people see, talk, and even feel towards a certain race. He used it to promote the social equality um, and also how South Africa is seen globally through inclusivity brought by the national team. This shows how the sport became more than just a game, but a way for a society to heal and transform for the better based on its past. Additionally, the movie continues to contribute to demonstrating how these games can become more than just competition and entertainment. It reminds viewers how sports can play a large positive role in building a lot of important characteristics such as empathy, resilience, respect, teamwork, leadership, forgiveness, and so much more. There are moments in this film that these characters are really being built, but my personal favorite was when the team visited the school to teach rugby to the kids, which really helps show how social and racial barriers are being broken down and characteristics such as empathy and teamwork are being created in not only the kids, but the team as well. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Daniel, and I will be discussing some of the negative aspects of Invictus. Invictus is very inspirational. However, there are some aspects of the movie that can be portrayed as negative, starting off with the lack of showing Mandela's obstacles or the lack of depth in historical context. In the movie, it doesn't really dive too deep in Mandela's background, and it fails to provide some of the struggles that he faced early on in his life. For example, his time before and after prison, it didn't really showcase that time at all, and he was in prison for 20 plus years. And it also didn't showcase the struggles that he faced politically or socially. It just kind of like showed the aftermath and his time during the rugby. And this is important because the viewers are unfamiliar with some of the information and they may not understand or grasp the importance or significance of the event that is being portrayed in the movie. So that's why it's important that the movie gives all the background information. And next, the a movie often simplifies the hardships and the complex issues. The film often oversimplifies some of the political and racial tensions that are going on, and the film arguably also downplays a lot of the things that are going on, such as the racial inequality and racism that is going on. So I feel like the movie is kind of downplaying a lot of the events that are happening and making it seem like it's not as bad, when in reality it's pretty bad. And lastly, the movie is pretty empathetic during some aspects of the movie, and it kind of like drifts towards like the seriousness and the happy and symbolic moments. So I feel, for example, a time that it was too empathetic was during like the rugby and when they were celebrating. I feel they should spend more time on the important and broader issues that are going on, such as like the racial inequality, and it's kind of distracting from the important issues by like you spending too much time on the celebration and unnecessary moments. So I feel like they should spend more of their time discussing some of the actually important and issues that matter in this movie. And yeah, thank you so much.
Regardless of how good functionalist theory and critical theory are to the movie, there are flaws for both theories. To begin with, for functionalist theory, this theory could portray national unity as achieved way too quickly or smoothly, which underestimates the deep and ongoing racial, economic, and social divides in South Africa. There are many people who do not agree, and it's not fair to them that it was shown that everyone was just on board with it when that's not the truth. Another flaw is that it focuses a lot on Mandela's leadership and ignores broader systematic efforts or other people who contributed it. He was not the only one who made a difference. There are many other people, but those people are not seen as important as Mandela. Another flaw is that it's implied that all South Africans were all equally willing to unite behind rugby, which overlooks those who honestly did not support or just were did not have a voice in the say, and it just made it seem that everyone was happy with the decision when that's not the truth as well. Critical theory's flaws would be that the film focuses on symbolic gestures like rugby and national pride, but sidelines the bigger issues like poverty, land inequality, or economic injustice. Another flaw is that it doesn't fully show the true struggles by removing the activism and just focuses on a certain topic, which should be the rugby and the inequality there, instead of the bigger issues that actually are going on in South Africa. And then the final flaw would be that critical voices are not given depth and the reconciliation as a primary goal of the post-apartheid state, but it's just as absent. There's no accountability, no reparations regarding that, and it just further supports the flaws in the film.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin, and today I'll be talking a little bit about the movie Invictus and looking at some of its flaws using the two theories that we've been going over in class, which are the functionalist theory and critical theory. Invictus tells us a positive and inspiring story about Nelson Mandela and the South African rugby team, and it shows us how the team help bring people together after apartheid. But when we take a closer look through these two theories, we start to see that the film leaves out some really important aspects. For starters, the functionalist theory. This theory says that different parts of society work together to keep things stable. And in the movie, rugby is shown as something that unites the country and creates national pride. And that's completely fine and awesome, but there's a big problem with that. The film makes it look like South Africa suddenly became united overnight just because of the Rugby World Cup. It completely skips over the deep struggles that were still happening, like racial tension, economic inequality, and lack of trust between communities. And the idea that everything came together so quickly is not realistic. And rebuilding trust and creating true unity takes a very long time, and the movie really rushes that part. And secondly, when we look through the lenses of critical theory, The theory focuses on power and inequality and how the media and culture can sometimes hide deeper issues. In the movie Invictus, Mandela supporting the mostly white rugby team is shown as a smart and powerful move by his part, but the movie puts a lot more attention on his relationship with the white team captain instead of focusing on real changes that could help the black majority in his community. And the movie uses sports to tell a feel-good story. It makes you feel great after you watch it. You feel empowered. But that story makes it seem like teamwork and hope solve all the problems within the community. And it doesn't show how many Black South Africans were still struggling with the effects of apartheid, racism, and poverty. So instead of showing real progress, it gives us a simple, symbolic version of unity and leaves out the harder truth of it all. And in the end, Invictus is inspiring on the surface, but both functionalist and critical theory shows that the story is way too simplified. Yes, sports can bring people together, but they don't fix everything. Real unity and forgiveness takes a lot of time, honesty, and action on both parts. And a more complete version of the movie would include the voices of everyday South Africans who had different points of views on the sport of rugby and what real unity should look like within the community. Thank you.
They bring people together, promote shared values like teamwork and discipline, and give us a sense of belonging. We still see this in events like the World Cup or the Olympics, where millions of people around the world come together to support their countries. After tragedies like 9/11 in the US, sports helped communities heal. Even on a smaller scale, high school and college sports help students feel connected to something larger than themselves. They promote structure, purpose, and unity in ways that go beyond just winning or losing. But at the same time, critical theory reminds us that sports are not always fair or inclusive. In Invictus, the Springboks are initially seen as a symbol of white supremacy, and that highlights how sports can also reflect systematic inequality. We still see this today. Female athletes, for example, continue to fight for equal pay and media coverage. Just look at the US women's soccer team. Racial inequality is also present, especially in leadership roles. Even though the majority of NFL players are Black, most coaches are executives, and executives are white. And in college sports, programs that make the most money, like football and basketball, often get most resources, while others are underfunded, especially women's and non-revenue sports. So while sports can unite us, they also mirror the inequalities we see in the rest of society. Invictus shows both the promise and the problems in sport, and today's sports world continues to reflect the same duality. That's why understanding both functionalism and critical theory is so important. It helps us see how sports shape culture and how culture shapes sports. Thank you.
My name is Jessica Zemming, and I'm going to be talking about why functionalism and the critical theory are extremely relevant in sports today. For functionalism, in the United States, sports remain a central part of community building as well as social integration. Also, in the United States, sports are integrated in school systems, promoting teamwork, communication, and community values. And that's more than just in school athletic programs. It's also seen in recreational sports and club teams. Events such as the Olympics and national sport games hone a sense of national pride and unity as people gather to support their favorite athletes and teams. Functionalism is also reflected in how modern sports merge diverse communities, creating shared experiences across cultural lines. And another take I got from functionalism in modern day sport is that youth sport programs in inner cities promote engagement, not only for physical development, but also for building social connections and cohesion amongst children from various backgrounds. For the critical theory, this theory was created by Karl Marx, and it is used to analyze issues related to race, gender, and economic disparities in athletics. A very predominant example of this is in women's sports, which many women face persistent problems like unequal pay, lack of media exposure, and exploitation. Another example of this is in college sports funding, where fees from student tuition are disproportionately showing that they support men's sports over women's sports, with a lot of those fundings going towards football and men's basketball, leaving other sports in like crisis. And this imbalance shows how institutional values often place less importance on athletes depending on their race, gender, and background.